Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Samantha Leighanne and I talk about books. So this is, I'm not gonna say like out of the ordinary. I mean, I guess it is kind of out of the ordinary. I don't usually do tag videos, but this one has been floating around and I have gotten a lot of new subscribers lately, especially with my content going more and more in the horror direction. I thought that it would be fun to do this tag to, like, first of all, give you guys, especially those of you that are new here, a little bit better insight on who I am and the things that I enjoy, especially when we talk about horror. So today I'm going to be doing the horror life tag. This was originally done by Marie McWilliams. I will link her channel down below. She is someone who also discusses horror. I wasn't aware of her channel until I saw someone else do this tag, and so I've been watching her content. She's pretty great, so I definitely recommend checking her out. This tag has a total of 8 questions. Yes, it has a total of 8 questions, so we're just going to jump right into things. The first question is, what's the first horror movie that you remember seeing? This is a fun story. I guess this twice, two horror movies that really like stick with me. So the first one is Child's Play, the original Child's Play. I was in my kitchen with my mom. She was doing my makeup for Halloween, and that movie was playing in the background. I wouldn't say that I necessarily had a strict upbringing, but there were a lot of things that I wasn't allowed to do. I wasn't allowed to see PG-13 movies until I was like almost 13 years old. I wasn't allowed to see R-rated movies until I was like 16 or 17, like, you know, with my parents or whatever. So, you know, the fact that Child's Play, a horror film, was, you know, being played in my presence, regardless of whether or not it was on network television, was, you know, like kind of a big deal. So the second story and the second horror film that I can like really remember seeing, and I didn't even see the whole thing, was Scream 2. What I remember most is the beginning of Scream 2, where they're in the movie theater, and I watched that whole beginning sequence, you know, where they're you know, in the movie theater. This couple is in the movie theater. I remember getting to the end of that where she stands up and she's been stabbed and she just screams like in front of everyone. I remember that so vividly, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna get into so much trouble. I'm gonna get into so much trouble if my mom knows that I watched this. And I honestly can't remember how old I was. I know the DVD, I just looked this up, the DVD was released in 98. So it had to have been 98. 98 would have put me in 3rd grade. Because I was in 5th grade in the year 2000. I literally left the room because I was so scared that I was gonna get in trouble. I ended up watching Independence Day instead. Isn't that weird? Those are my 2 like memories of the first horror movies that I ever saw. Number 2 is, what's the first horror book you can remember reading? First of all, I remember Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I'm pretty sure that I've told this story on my channel before. However, I had a neighbor who was, I think, a year younger than I was, and she had a sister who was a couple of years older, and she used to bring us into the closet with the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and like she would read them to us with a flashlight. And I will never forget, she brought us into the closet once and told us one, and she, like, you know, got really into it, and she turned off the light at like the worst point. Scared the shit out of both of us. Like, we were crying. I'm pretty sure I had to sleep with the light on after that. I'm almost positive that that's a thing that happened. I read a lot of Goosebumps as a child. Then the first Stephen King that I read was Pet Sematary. I was in 7th grade. What is the movie that made you into a horror fan? This is a fun question because I didn't really watch a ton of horror films growing up, for obvious reasons that I have already explained. Some of the first ones that I can really remember seeing were The Haunting. I remember seeing the one with Catherine Zeta-Jones. I remember seeing that one, and what was his name? Liam Neeson was also in that one. But the thing that I think that really turned me into a horror fan as an adult was watching Hellraiser for the first time. And I watched that with Jeff, actually. That, and then also watching The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. By far, one of my absolute favorite horror films of all time. The practical effects in that are just amazing, and I love it. So what's the book that made you into a horror fan? I'm gonna be real with you. I can't point to a specific book that turned me into a horror fan. I think that Stephen King was my gateway into like real horror, though, because, you know, I shared that my first Stephen King I read whenever I was in 7th grade, and then from there I didn't read a whole ton. And then when I did start reading again, I started reading Stephen King again. And then I remember one of the other first like ghost stories that I read, and I read it whenever I was book blogging, was The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, and I really loved that one. And then I've read, a couple other horror books from there. But I think that Stephen King was what turned me into a horror fan to start, which is funny because I think that he's very overrated as a horror author. Don't bite my head off for saying that, but it's true. He writes a lot more than horror, and I think that, he gets the moniker, the king of horror all the time. And I think especially lately, like, he's not really written a ton of horror, so there's that. My favorite horror movie of all time, that is so hard because I have like 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. When we talk about franchises, the Evil Dead franchise, I love those films, all 3 of them. I love them. Obviously, I love the first one. The second one is slightly more horror comedy, and then Army of Darkness is just, comedy mostly, and with some horror elements thrown in. But I still love it. I love the Ash versus Evil Dead series, television series. I love it. And then I loved the 2013 remake that they did of the film. I thought that was a really good, really imaginative remake. I thought they did a really good job, but it's gross. It's so gross. That's definitely one of my favorites. The Hellraiser franchise is also one of my favorites for sure. Some of the later films are absolutely terrible, but I think that the first 2 films are really strong in their own right. Apparently, there is a remake in development as well as a TV series also in development. I'm a little apprehensive on both of those things. We'll see how it goes. But probably the other favorite that I have is John Carpenter's The Thing. It wasn't even a remake. It was like a prequel that they did. Was okay. The thing that I was most sad about was the CG that they used in that. I think that one of the best things about the original Thing is the practical effects that they used. It was terrifying. But the CG that they did in the new one was just sad. And what was even more sad is watching some behind the scenes stuff and a couple of videos on YouTube. They had actually done practical effects for that, and the studio was like, nope, throw it out, we want CG. And I'm just so sad about that because I bet that the practical effects were absolutely amazing. What is your favorite horror book? That's too hard. I don't like picking like one single favorite horror anything, if I'm being honest. I don't like it. I have so many favorites. Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. The Devil Crept In by Anya Alborn. Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. There's so many books that I really love as far as horror. So what I'm gonna do, I named those particular books for you now, but I will link in the cards up above for you the list that I made of my favorite horror books. So you can check that out at your leisure. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. Next question, what's your favorite horror trope? Haunted houses and possessions, for sure. Those are my 2 favorites. Possessions, mostly because the idea of having another entity like take control of you and having to take a back seat to like, your mental faculties or even like your physical being is absolutely terrifying, especially because I am personally such a control freak. And then also the, like haunted houses, the idea of home, which is, the place that's supposed to be most comforting. And I am a homebody for sure. The idea of that suddenly becoming a place that is no longer safe is terrifying to think about. So I really enjoy those stories. And why do you love horror is the last question. I actually posted a video on this. This was probably 2 years ago now, but I think that the points still stand. I'll link that up above if you decide that you want to, peruse that at your leisure. But I think that one of the things that I love about horror is it gives us an outlet to feel scared. So often in our everyday lives, like we're told to just like get over shit, I guess. You have to pick up and you have to keep moving. And I think horror really gives you, reading horror and watching horror gives you that, 90 minutes or, 2 hours or however long your film is to be scared, or, whatever time span it is that you're that it takes to read your book. Like, it gives you that ability to be scared and then turn it off, and to like not bring that into your everyday life, you know, and to really like give those emotions an outlet. The other reason that I really like horror is I think that it explores a lot of emotion that people don't give it credit for. One of the things that I've seen in a lot of films that I've watched, or some of the books that I've read here recently, there's a lot of layering in horror fiction. You know, on the surface, there is, you know, this monster or this entity that is really, you know, created as a way to, say, for example, deal with the death and the grief of a loved one. And I think that it's just a way for us to process a lot of those feelings and those emotions that we may not know how to process, to give those things a face and give them a name and a way to deal with them. If that makes any sense at all, I hope it does. But I think that that's one of the things that I really love about horror, is it's so much more than just being scared. There's so much emotion that you can explore to it. So that's just, you know, how I feel about it. Yeah, so that's how I feel about horror. I enjoy doing this tag. I'm not gonna tag anybody because I'm really bad about tagging people, and I'm always afraid that like people won't do tags. So I'm not gonna tag anybody, but feel free to do this if you so desire. Again, the original creator is linked in the down bar below. I suggest going to watch her video and going to check out her channel. Tell me about your favorite horror books or horror movies and that sort of thing down in the down bar below. I would love to discuss. Remember, you can also connect with me on Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram. All my social media links are in the down bar below. If this is your first time here, hi, hello, and welcome. This is, I guess, kind of a good introduction, but if you like what you see and you want to see more, you can click thumbs up. You can hit subscribe if you haven't already. You can also click the little bell doodad to be notified when I upload videos. As always, thank you guys so very much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.